everybody, and welcome to
Hustle to Empire,
the podcast where we dive into the unbelievable stories of entrepreneurs who turn their crazy ideas into billion-dollar businesses. Today, we've got a story that's straight out of the How Did This Happen playbook. We're talking about Airbnb, the company that went from inflatable mattresses to a $100 billion empire. I'm Brady, and as always, I'm joined with my partners, Adrian and Maddie.
Hey Brady, I'm so pumped for this episode. I mean, Airbnb has to be one of the most mind-boggling stories in the startup world. I love how they turned such a random idea into something so massive. It's basically the definition of, hey, let's just try this and see what happens.
Absolutely. I think it's one of those how is this real stories. I mean, who would have thought that the company where you book a place to sleep on a mattress that may or may not be your host's personal air mattress would grow into one of the most successful companies in the world. The fact that it went from that to a global empire is insane. Let's break it down and get into what made their journey so fascinating and honestly hilarious at times.
All right, let's take it back. It's 2007. Brian Chesky and Joe Gibbia, two broke designers living in San Francisco, are struggling to make rent. Classic startup story, right? They didn't have a grand vision for the future. They were just figuring out how to make ends meet. So, what did they do? They decided to host a few strangers in their apartment on air mattresses and offer them breakfast. How's that for a game plan?
Let's just pause for a moment here. Imagine this, two guys in a tiny San Francisco apartment with no money, no investors, and no plans. And then, just like that, they come up with this idea. Why not let people sleep on the floor for cash? Honestly, it's the most we're not making rent and we'll try anything idea I've ever heard. But hey, it worked. They knew that there was a design conference in town and hotels were booked solid. So Brian and Joe thought, why not open up our place to some conference attendees and make a little extra cash? They called it Airbed and Breakfast. Boom, Airbnb was born.
You know it. It almost sounds like a setup for a comedy sketch, right? I mean, it's the ultimate what's the worst that could happen moment. Hey, come stay with us. We have an air mattress and cereal. Oh, don't worry. We'll make you breakfast too. Maybe some toast or a bagel. We're kind of running on fumes here. But honestly, that's what makes it so brilliant. Instead of waiting for the perfect business plan to fall into their laps, they just did it. It wasn't glamorous, but it was something. And sometimes that's all it takes.
Exactly. And the craziest part is that it worked. People actually came and stayed in their apartment on air mattresses, and they loved it. These weren't just any guests either. They were conference attendees who needed a cheap place to crash. And that's even more wild. The first guests actually gave feedback that helped shape the Airbnb experience. They weren't just paying customers, they were helping to build the brand. Imagine being the first person to leave a review for Airbnb. You'd be like, yeah, so I stayed in this guy's living room on a mattress and ate breakfast from a bowl that wasn't mine. But honestly, not bad. Would do it again.
And that's what's so awesome about this. Airbnb didn't start off with a massive marketing budget. It was just about building trust and creating an experience. And to think this whole empire started with a couple air mattresses and a bowl of cereal. Honestly, if you had told me back then that was going to become a $100 billion business, I would have said sure. And next time you'll tell me we're all going to be paying for pizza with cryptocurrency.
And you know what? If they had tried to wait for the perfect moment or the right funding, it might have never happened. They didn't overthink it, they just got started. They hosted their first guests and learned as they went. That's the real hustle here. Taking a risk, trying something unconventional, and seeing where it takes you.
Exactly. But after those first few guests, Brian and Joe had to realize that as cool as it was to host random people in their apartment, the air mattress hustle wasn't going to be enough to turn this into a full-fledged business. They needed cash, so they got a little more creative.
This is where things get really fun. So here's the deal. They were broke and they didn't have any investors, but they had an idea. And that's where the Obama O's and Captain McCain's cereal boxes came into play. Yes, you heard me right. During the 2008 presidential election, Brian and Joe came up with the genius idea to sell limited edition cereal boxes with the faces of Barack Obama and John McCain on them. They sold these boxes for $40 each, $40 for cereal. Who would pay that? Apparently enough people.
I can imagine the pitch meeting for this idea. All right, team, we're out of money, but hear me out. We sell cereal, but not just any cereal, political cereal. We'll put Obama's face on one box, McCain's on the other. They're collector items. Obviously, people love political stuff, right? And somehow, Somehow it worked. They raised over $30,000 by selling these cereal boxes. $30,000. This is like the most bizarre GoFundMe campaigns ever.
Right. It's like, sure, let's sell a box of cereal for $40 with a politician's face on it, but only for a limited time. The perfect way to grab people's attention and make some quick cash. I honestly love how ridiculous it is. It wasn't just about selling cereal, it was about getting people to notice them, getting them to take them seriously. And that $30,000 helped keep Airbnb alive long enough to catch the attention of some serious investors.
And you know what's even funnier? It wasn't even about selling cereal for the right reasons. It was more like, look, we're creative, we're scrappy, and we'll literally do whatever it takes just to keep this thing alive. Imagine telling your friends, yeah, I sold cereal to raise money for my startup. And their response is, wait, you sold what?
Exactly. But the best part, it worked. They raised the money, kept the dream alive, and suddenly people were paying attention. I'm honestly just picturing them in a tiny apartment packing boxes of Obama O's and McCain cereal, hoping the whole thing doesn't fall apart. I bet they were stoked when they saw that $30,000 rolling in. They probably high-fived each other like, well, we're not going to die in a pile of credit debt.
Right, and just like that, they went from serial hustlers to startup legends. But after the serial hustle, there was one big problem that they had to solve: the trust problem. How do you convince people to sleep in a stranger's apartment on an air mattress when there's literally no guarantee it's going to be safe? I mean, how do you convince someone to trust you enough to pay to sleep in your living room? How do you say, hey, it's cool, just crash here, no big deal?
This is where the magic happened. The first step in solving the trust problem was simple: great photos. I mean, think about it. Airbnb was asking people to stay in someone else's home. There was no reputation, no security like hotels offer. But they realized that trust wasn't just about saying they were a trustworthy service. It was about showing it. So Brian, Joe, and Nathan Blacharski made an investment, professional photographers to shoot listings. Good photos, great photos. And this, folks, is the real turning point.
It sounds so simple, right? But think about it. If you're looking online for a place to stay, which one are you more likely to click on? The one with a dark, blurry photo where you can barely see the bed, or the one with a clean, well-lit photo of a cozy, inviting space? People don't just want a place to sleep, they want an experience, and those professional photos made the listing feel like more than just a cheap room. They made it feel personal and welcoming.
Exactly. Airbnb wasn't just about renting out a mattress in someone's apartment. It was about creating a home away from home. And that shift, making it feel less like a stranger's living room and more like an actual home, was huge. Suddenly, people started to trust the platform more.
It was a game changer. It wasn't just the photos, it was the fact that Airbnb didn't stop there. They kept innovating, kept finding new ways to make people feel more comfortable. And you know what? Eventually, people started to look, and guess what? Airbnb was finally gaining traction.
That's right, Adrian. But even when they started to see success, they still didn't have it all figured out. In fact, they were this close to shutting down at one point. They were out of money, running on fumes. But they didn't give up. They dug deep, and in 2010, they got a massive break.
Enter Sequoia Capital, a $7.2 million investment. That's when everything started to click. The hustle paid off, and Airbnb finally got the funding it needed to become the global empire we know today. And the rest, as they say, is history.
And that's the big takeaway, right? Persistence, creativity, and the willingness to go for broke, even when everything seems like it's about to fall apart. Brian, Joe, and Nathan didn't let failure define them, and they learned from it. It adapted and pushed forward, and that's how you turn a wild idea into a billion-dollar business.
Exactly, and that's what makes a story so inspiring. It's not just about the idea itself. It's about the hustle, the grit, and the constant evolution. Airbnb didn't get to $100 billion by sitting around and waiting for things to magically happen. They worked for it.
And that's what we're all about here on Hustle to Empire, celebrating those who hustle, who grind, and who turn wild ideas into incredible success stories. Airbnb's journey is the perfect example of how persistence and creativity can turn anything from an air mattress to a Obama's into a global empire.
Before we wrap up, I gotta say something real quick. I remember a time where I had to take a leap of faith to finish a project that seemed really out of reach. Taking that leap wasn't easy, but it taught me that sometimes you just have to take a chance, even if it sounds super dumb. I was totally freaked out at first, but pushing past that fear showed me that a bold move can change your whole game. It's that bold move that pushes you forward no matter what and reminds you that sometimes the wildest ideas lead to the coolest wins.
Looking back, I recall a time when I made a huge, nerve-wracking decision on a project that nobody thought would work. Trusting my gut, even when everything stunk, was crazy, but it changed my whole outlook. I stayed up all night wondering if I would crash and burn, but once I just went for it, everything shifted. That risk taught me that sometimes the best ideas come when you just throw caution to the wind and trust yourself, even when it seems like it's a total long shot.
And for me, there's this one moment when I chose the totally unpredictable path. I was scared, but that choice opened up opportunities I never saw coming. I learned so much about what I could handle and discovered new parts of myself I didn't even know existed. It's proof that sometimes the wildest decisions are the ones that can lead to those coolest adventures. And if you're brave enough to take that step, you might just end up with an epic story of your own.
Well, that's it for today's episode of Hustle to Empire. We hope you enjoyed the wild ride of Airbnb's journey from mattresses to millions. There's so much to learn from their story, and we can't wait to bring you more incredible stories of entrepreneurs who turn their hustle into empires.
Thanks for tuning in, everyone. Be sure to subscribe so you don't miss our next episode. Who knows, maybe we'll be talking about the next Airbnb in the making, or maybe someone's next cereal idea.
Catch you next time with more amazing stories. Stay hungry, stay creative, and keep hustling.